In my youth, Perry Mason was a cause for Saturday night family conflict. Perry Mason was Mom's favorite TV show. It wasn't mine. I much preferred Bonanza. So it was Cartwright versus Mason from 1959 when the Bonanza started until the Cartwrights changed viewing night. Perry Mason aired from September 21, 1957 to May 22, 1966. It lasted 9 seasons and 271 episodes. Perry Mason's character has been around for nearly half a century. Earl Stanley Gardner introduced him in his first novel, The Case of the Velvet Claws. That was back in 1933. Since then, Perry Mason has been one of the most famous characters in all of American culture. That theme music that you hear from that long-running TV series is instantly recognizable, even today. Earl Stanley Gardner, who lived from 1889 to 1970, was a lawyer with outside interest, including writing Pulp Fiction. He opened his first law office in 1917. Gardner spent 20 years in the legal profession and nearly that long as a writer before creating Perry Mason, his alter ego. His Perry Mason series has, in fact, sales of 300 million, ranking it number 3 in the top 10 best-selling book series. And at the time of his death, Earl Stanley Gardner was the best-selling American author in the 20th century. Many of Mason's novels were first published in popular magazines of the time, such as the Saturday Evening Post. Sometimes those magazines used different titles. 6 of his novels were adapted for Perry Mason films of the 1930s. Of course, many more were adapted for the television series. The first to play Perry Mason on screen was Warren William in The Case of the Howling Dog. Della Street was played by Helen Trenholm. It was a movie released only a year after the publication of Gardner's first Mason movie. Perry Mason was Hollywood's first hour-long weekly series made for television and shown on CBS. The executive producer was Gail Patrick Jackson. The show was considered to be the first authentic law show. The series began filming in April 1957. The budget for each episode was $100,000. For its first 5 years, Perry Mason aired on Saturday nights, surpassing even Bonanza in viewership. In 1962, Perry Mason was moved to Thursday nights. Many actors tested for the Perry Mason role on TV. Richard Carlson, Mike Connors, Richard Egan, William Holden, and Efren Zimbalist Jr. were some of those considered. Raymond Burr initially read for the role of Hamilton Berger, the district attorney and Mason's primary adversary. In the 1951 film A Place in the Sun, Burr was told he was perfect for the role of Perry Mason and he should try out for it. His weight, though, was a concern. Being 60 pounds overweight, he went on a crash diet. A month later, Raymond Burr tested as Perry Mason. The rest, as they say, is history. Barbara Hale was originally contacted to play Della Street, and she said no. She was raising 3 young children at home at the time. Hale was told the show would be limited to just 18 episodes. But when she found out Raymond Burr had been signed on, she reconsidered. Burr was one of the first people she had met at RKO when she began her acting career. That fact helped persuade her to become Della Street. William Hopper, who played the detective Paul Drake, also auditioned for the Mason role. He was the son of Hedda Hopper, an American actress and gossip columnist. Obviously, he didn't get to portray Mason, but when he read for Paul Drake, he blurted out, "You hate my mother," and that won him the role of Paul Drake. The producer had an actor in mind for the Los Angeles District Attorney, Hamilton Berger. William Tallman, an accomplished actor, was cast as Hamilton Berger. Tallman later said of Hamilton Berger that he was the most unsuccessful prosecuting attorney in the history of the legal profession. Lieutenant Arthur Tragg was played by Ray Collins, an American character actor on Broadway theater, in radio, film, and television. Executive producer Gail Patrick Jackson said of Collins, "We overlooked the fact that on an actual police force, he would probably be long retired." There were many celebrities who appeared in Perry Mason's court. Here is Barbara Eden in 1957 in the case of the Angry Mourner. And this, maybe you recognize her as Mrs. C, Mrs. Cunningham, Marion Ross, 1959, the case of the romantic rogue. And Mr. Sulu from Star Trek, 1959, the case of the blushing pearls. And this handsome fellow is in the case of the treacherous toupee in 1960. Do you recognize him as Robert Redford? Do you recognize Dr. McCoy Bones from Star Trek? This is in 1961, the case of the unwelcome bride. How about this guy, the skipper from Gilligan's Island, the case of the bouncing boomerang, 1963, Alan Hale. And here's another Star Trekker, Leonard Nimoy, 1963, the case of the shoplifter's shoes. And what about Cloris Leachman, 1966, the case of the crafty kidnapper. And in the final episode, Dick Clark, the case of the final fade out, 1966. Here's some Perry Mason trivia. Over the course of 9 seasons, the Perry Mason television series featured 270 defendants and a cast of 1,903 actors. A total of 34 actors appeared twice as defendants. 9 actors appeared 3 times as Perry's clients. 1 actor, Lorene Tuttle, portrayed a defendant 4 times. Perry Mason actually lost 1 case, the case of the deadly verdict. But it wasn't his fault. his client withheld evidence which he needed to win. In an episode entitled The Case of the Dead Ringer, Raymond Burr appears in his regular role as Perry Mason, but he also plays a character by the name of Mr. Grimes, a drunk troublemaker and the spitting image of Perry Mason. The Grimes character's role is a lot closer to the type of characters that Raymond Burr was used to playing before he came to the Mason series. It's been several decades since Perry Mason originally began showing on television, and it still hasn't lost its entertainment value. Currently, it is on at 10:30 on one of the local channels, and my wife has gotten hooked. She used to watch it as a child, and she's still watching it. She stays up late at night now and watches that. And I've overheard her tell her friend one day that she had to quit watching the show because he was upsetting her nighttime sleep schedule. Perry Mason was quite a conflict for the DeRousse family when he began, and I bet my mother would still be watching the program today if she were still around. Perry Mason was really a great classic TV program.